Hello, everyone. I am excited to introduce you to Cindy from Art Class Curator. I've known Cindy for a long time within our kid blogging world, so I'm really excited to introduce you to her. Today, we're going to be looking at something we're both very passionate about, is how to integrate autism and art. And Cindy's going to share with us her personal story, and I'm sure I will too, with us, and specifically diving in, how do we integrate art? How do we look at art as an expression within our yoga classes? So let's get started. Thank you so much for being here, Cindy. Why don't you start by talking about your background, your passion, and your work?
Awesome. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have always, since as long as I can remember, been obsessed with art. When I was a child, it was about making art. And I lived in a small town and we didn't have like art to look at or experience. So I didn't discover that until later. But what I really loved as a child was Disney movies. And I would watch all the Disney movies. I would study the animation and who animated which character. Like I was really emotionally moved by them in a way that I couldn't really explain. Like I saw Lion King 12 times at the movie theater and cried every single time I saw it.
Right.
And then like a few years later, I discovered like works of art. I took a art history class in high school and took a Europe trip, and I was like, oh, other art exists, and then there's people in this world that's their job, that they get to look at it all day. Like, and I was so mesmerized by all of this art of the world, and so I ended up getting a degree in art history. Worked in museums for a while. And then museum's a hard career to have because they don't pay very well, and there's not a lot of jobs. So I ended up in the art classroom. And when I was in the art classroom, I realized that the way art is taught, and the way art teachers are taught to teach art, is a lot about the making. And I was really passionate about the looking at art and experiencing that side of it, and I saw a big gap in what resources were available for teachers about that art criticism, art appreciation component, art history component. And so I created my business, Art Class Curator, to help teachers do that, and parents, homeschool parents too. I have a lot of them in my community. And so I developed this website, and then it has a membership site, and we talk about how to look at art and how to interpret it. But then along the way, I was always remembering that, like, when I'm with art and I'm looking at art, I have these really powerful emotional moments. And it's never been about learning about the art. It's never been about the artist was this such and such whoever, and they did this, and that's really fascinating. So it's always been about, I have something in the art reaches me emotionally, personally, and I have this personal connection. And I'm working with teachers, and I'm working with students. I'm trying to help them, and I'm like, art is about something else. It's not about the history. It's not about the colors. It's not about the media. Like, there's this magical other thing that we're not talking about. And so I started to explore what that was, and ultimately realized that it's about the artist's humanity and the viewer's humanity kind of coming together. And that's where like that magic happens. Whoever is looking at it is going to have a different experience than anybody else, because they bring their full humanity to it, and the artist brings their full humanity to it, and that's what creates that magic. So I started to explore the idea of like, how do we get into that space, and what can we learn about ourselves, and use art more as like a tool for self-development, self-discovery, and personal connection, and connection to our humanity and our, bigger things. So now I do programs. I still work with teachers, but I also do programs for adults, a program called the Art Connection Circle. And I also wrote a memoir kind of working all of this out, and it's called Art is About Being Whole, because like I said, art is not about all those other things, that there was something else. And so Art is About Being Whole, a memoir, just came out a few months ago. And I'm a creative person, and it's honestly, like, I think the best thing I've ever created. I'm absolutely obsessed with it.
So, it's amazing. Yeah. What I love about your story too, Cindy, is that I love this piece about it. It's so surprising to me, right? You think of art, and I know, watching my daughter, and when I was a school teacher, there's the and we're doing all the same thing. Or as you say, there's a curriculum we have to follow. But what you've taken it to this other level of embodying creativity, embodying
Yes.
understanding yourself on a holistic level. And that I mean, that's for us the yoga lifestyle as well, right? It's about uncovering your onion, peeling yourself and find out
Mhm.
who are you, who are you, your true self, and thinking about our multiple intelligences, right? So many of us, especially in our Western world, we're it's academic focused, right? It's about
Yes.
who's the top of class or who's the top of the sports or whatever, and we don't often stop and think, acknowledge or embrace those children who really art is their thing, right? And so one thing we've connected on is your recent journey, looking at understanding yourself better. And tell us a little bit, take us on that journey about, peeling that onion and
Yeah.
what you've discovered.
Yeah. And something about what you just said is so perfect about the embodying and how that connects to yoga, because there's a line in my book that says, and I don't remember exactly what it says, but that art always took me out of my mind and into my body, like into
Mm.
somewhere else. And I think that so alongside this lifelong obsession with art, there has been a lifelong obsession with trying to fix myself. So it's been
Mm.
about studying psychology, it's been about going to therapy, it's been about reading books, it's been about, because my entire life, all I can think about is I've always felt different.
Mm.
I've always felt like an alien, and I didn't know how to act in this no in this world that's not my home world. And I always felt like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't, and I would study other people, and they would seem so light and free and easy, and I'd be like, surely
Mm.
I'm not the only one. I used to write poems too, and as a child, there's poems in the book too. That's a full circle moment. But I have these poems I wrote when I was like 13. It was like, um, I wish everyone would just start acting like they really are in the inside. And then I always just like, I don't know. So at first it was okay. There was a lot. I had to heal like my childhood trauma. So I kind
Mm.
of worked through that. I had an alcoholic dad. I worked through that, and then I had like really severe social anxiety in my 20s. Kind of worked through that. There was shame. I had to work through the shame. It was like working through one thing at a time. And
Mm.
then I would work through the thing, and I would work through the thing, and I would work through the next thing and work through the next thing. It was like just layers upon layers. And then I'm like, there's still things. Like, when is it going to stop? And then finally I realized, like, okay, I feel good. I don't feel anxious anymore. I'm not like riddled with anxiety all the time. I'm not like depressed. I can talk to people. I still feel different, but I like figured out how to talk to people. I started doing work that worked with my nervous system, and I got to be creative. So it worked with like a lot of who I am. And then I was like, there's still more things. There's something else. Like, what is this other thing? And so then I learned I've been stuffing down all my feelings my whole life. So then I had learned how to feel my feelings. And then I was like, there's still things. And then like finally I cured, like, I thought I cured everything. But then still I noticed, oh, when I go out in the world, like everything's really loud and everything's really chaotic, and my skin feels really uncomfortable if wind touches it, and like, all these things that the anxiety and the shame were hiding. I
Mm.
was like, I started to notice I had all these sensory things. And then that was around the same time I had kids, and my daughter, both of my daughters are autistic, diagnosed, and like they had sensory things. And I was like, oh, I didn't know sensory things. That wasn't a thing when I was a kid. Like,
No.
I don't, I, yeah, we didn't know that existed. And I was like, oh, okay, so okay, I have sensory problems. So I figured that out, and I was like, oh yeah, I only wear soft clothes. And then I figured out I had ADHD, and then that like blew my mind, because I was like, that made so much sense. So it was just like one thing and after another. That was like about 2 years ago I figured out I had ADHD, and my whole life reframed and reassembled itself with this new information, because I was like, how can I be like, I'm a successful business person, I'm really creative, I'm really smart, I've made it this far in my life, but how come my house is a complete disaster? How come I can never find, and like, how come I can be holding my phone, I put it down, and then it disappears. And I'm like, how am I so non-functional as a person? And that like gave me the answer to that. And then only recently, after the book came out, did I realize that I was autistic too. And it was like, I'd always kind of, taken the tests, so many times in my life. And I resonated with, and if someone posted on Facebook that was like, if you've ever been called an empath, a highly sensitive person, and there was like this list, they're like, you might be autistic. And I was like, oh, I've called myself all of those things. And so I was like, oh, maybe there's something to this. And then I started to realize like, I was calling myself ADHD with some autistic traits. And then I realized, but the ones I didn't think I had, which is hilarious, is I didn't think I had special interests, when literally my entire life has been dedicated to art. That's all I've thought or done my entire life. Right. So of course it became such a part of who I am that I just didn't even think of it as a special interest. And then I thought like socially I was okay. But then I started to remember, I'm like, no, I did study people. I did learn. I had to learn how to act socially. And so then it just like was this bomb of a realization of, oh, I'm autistic too, and this makes so much sense. And now I feel like there's nothing left. I feel like that was the thing in the center of this onion I've been peeling back for 20 plus years. And so now I feel really like this was only maybe a month ago that or I guess a month and a half ago that I've sort of figured this out. And now I feel really, it's exciting about the possibility of what's next, but it's also just like a whole realization of seeing my entire life through this new lens. That has just got me really like untethered. I think I feel really unstable because of it, but also really excited that like I finally figured it out, like this lifelong puzzle that I figured out.
Right. Oh, your story's amazing. I love that you never stopped. You never stopped looking, and you kept uncovering, kept doing different things. And there was always a sense of you weren't whole, right? Yeah. You felt like, it sounds like you were always looking for, like you said, fix myself. So you always knew there was something more you want to learn about yourself. So, I mean, good on you for just keep going, right? So many people just put their head in the sand, right? And don't want to face what their demons or things that make them different or whatever. And I love what you said there about special interests. So that is one thing I've learned about having a daughter with autism and ADHD as well, is that the special interests of girls in particular, women, are often special interests that are completely like normal, like everybody. Right. It's not, art, or playing Roblox. Everyone plays Roblox, or, so it doesn't present itself as clearly. So speaking of that, what's your experience like with art and your girls, for example, that they're on the spectrum? How does art play how does it play a role in your family, for example?
Oh, it's so funny. You would think you would think they would love art as much as I do, but they don't. I've tried, and I try to take them to museums. I spend my whole life talking about art education, and they are just flat out not interested. And they'll humor me or or whatever, and they will. My youngest is a maker, and so she likes, it's not necessarily art that she likes to do, but she likes to craft. And so we always had this running joke of anytime we'd go in her room, we'd always come out with tape on our feet because but turns out like one of her special interests, she loves mythology, and she loves to read. So she loves mythology, and she loves like fandoms of all sorts. But so she's always making the weapons. So you'll go in her room and she'll have taped like 15 straws together trying to make a sword, or she's trying to make, it was always, she was making weapons. So it wasn't necessarily making art, but she is a maker. But then my other daughter, she uses art in a different way. Her special interest is like Taylor Swift. Obviously that's a lot of girls like, so that's you would think. It's not the thing that is like the special interest that's the thing that makes you autistic. It's the intensity in which you pursue your special interest. It's the like how it can take over your life, and how you can be so engrossed in it that if someone comes up to you and starts talking to you, you don't hear them, you don't even know they exist. You don't go to you're like, I am so engrossed in this that I forget to go to the bathroom. I forget to feed myself. I'm like, all of a sudden I get up, I'm like, oh, why do I feel so terrible? It's because I've ignored everything in my body for the last 10 hours because I was
right, right.
engrossed in it. But yeah, my oldest daughter, she does like bullet journal. Or one of her special interests too is like organization. So she loves like her bullet journal and making it cute and stuff like that. So they both do creative things.
Yes.
Oh, and my oldest for hers for a very long time was making videos, and so she would make these really wonderfully creative videos.
Right.
But she
I
moved
think
on from.
that, yeah, I think that's the thing, right?
Yeah,
That art creativity shows up in lots of different ways. And that
yeah,
feels like what exactly that point is, that there's acknowledgement of there's different intelligences, of different creativities, different ways you can bring art into expression, right? And so let's think about, what would be your top tips if you're sitting with all your art teachers, for example, or a bunch of educators. What would you say are your sort of top tips? How do you use art with neurodivergent learners, for example?
yeah. I think that the number one thing for neurodivergent people is to connect to that thing that they love. Both of my children are so shy, and they at home, they're not, but like, they're so shy. And so throughout their whole life, like a family member would come over, I'd be like, come in quietly, come in, don't overwhelm them. I was like, ask them about this. You ask them
Yeah.
about that, then you'll be in, I would
Yeah.
ask questions, be curious. So it was Loopsies for a while. I'm like, if you talk to her about Loopsies, you're going to be fine. So I think one of the things is to, if you can, tailor whatever project you're doing, lesson, to whatever they're interested in, and they will go above and beyond because they want to do it. And so even if like you're doing yoga and it's like, my daughter is obsessed with Greek gods, so it's like,
Yeah.
create a yoga routine or have her do one that makes her feel like Athena. Like, how would it, what movement of your body like really would feel like Athena? What would feel like Aries? So then you could do a warrior. You could do all those things. So
Yes.
it's like, and then the same thing with my other daughters. Like, she's obsessed with Taylor Swift. Like, have her look at Taylor Swift's concert and look at the dance moves she does and like see. And so it's like, if you could, I say this for all learners too, is, because my membership site, Art Class Curator, is dedicated to looking at art and talking about it. So it's not necessarily making, but one of the I call them the 4 C's of like how to choose a really good work of art, is the fourth C is connected. Like, if you can find one that is from someone from their culture, or from about something that they care about, or has emotions that they relate to, like, they're going to find their way into the art, and they're going to find their place in it.
Yeah.
And when it comes to looking at art, a lot of people will choose like the old masters, or they'll go like to Monet and Van Gogh, which they're great, but there's so much more art available for us to look at that the students can really resonate with, and that they can see themselves in. Because I didn't see myself in anything when I was a kid. Like, but I did feel like all along the way that when I was with art, I felt like I was welcomed and safe there.
Yeah.
And so if they're seeing themselves in whatever they're doing, or whatever you're showing them, or whatever, that's going to make them buy in. It's going to make them feel less alone. It's going to, there's so many good things in that. You're still doing all the art stuff, all their art, whatever you're trying to teach them, but they're going to be helped on many other layers beyond that too, if you find those personal connections.
Yes. Yeah, you're making it relevant and meaningful for them, right? To connect with them. And it sounds like you're coming from a filter of, I'm not looking to fix this child or change them.
Right.
I'm looking to see sort of open up them like a blossom, like a flower, right? To think,
yes,
how can I help them come out of their shell, right? And learn about them in a deeper way, right?
Yeah. And then just, I think too, another thing is just to be aware of like, what are all of the things that make someone neurodivergent. So it's a spectrum of symptoms. So the special interests or enthusiasms or one thing. But there's also like the eye contact, like a lot of autistic people don't like to make eye contact. So don't force them to make eye contact. Don't assume they're not listening to you because they're not looking at you.
Right.
Allow them to get up and move around, allow them to fidget, allow them to like, don't assume that if they're constantly getting up and walking around, that they're not paying attention. It actually probably helps them pay attention if they're moving around.
Yeah. And that works the opposite too, right? Because girls typically, which I didn't even realize until like the diagnosis, they are mimicking or white knuckling through the day. So they're
Yes.
just doing what other children are doing. So girls often get overlooked. They go under the radar. So you may have girls on the spectrum in your classes you don't even know because they're not displaying outwardly disruptive behaviors. Their insides could be full of anxiety or depression. Yes. And they're, my daughter, like, she was always looking around, see what other children were doing in the class. But so she couldn't focus on her own work, and then it looks like she can't do the work. Well, because she has all these other things going on for herself. So
yeah, and that overstimulation of senses, like one really good like definition of autism is that like we feel everything more deeply than you do or you being a neurotypical person. Like the temperature of the air, the way fabrics feel, the smells in the room, the sounds in the room, the movement in the room, emotions that other people are experiencing. Like if someone else is anxious, we're going to feel that anxiety too. And so in a classroom, I mean, and at the same time, we're feeling all that sensory information and we're trying to make it look like we're not. So we're like trying to act like everybody else. And so it's exhausting. And so one of the things, I'm sure your daughter would come home and just like sleep. Because it's just
no, she's the opposite. She just explodes. Yeah.
My daughter, my oldest just comes home and sleep, and my youngest just goes in a room for a very long time and never comes out because it's just too much. So like giving them a space to go like somewhere else to do whatever they're doing if they don't, and we're also very aware of what people are. We're very aware of being perceived. So we're trying to look normal, and so that the idea of being perceived by everybody around you is exhausting in and of itself. So that's why autistic people need time just to be completely alone with no one around them. And so if you see a student struggling, just say, hey, would you like to go out in the hall, or you want to even go in the hall? That's being perceived by everyone walking by, but like, a quiet space for them to go or something like that.
Yes. And that's where self-regulation obviously makes a huge difference, right? Is that they can start to notice their feelings, how are they going on the spectrum, right? And of their emotions. And because I noticed with my daughter, she even has a hard time identifying her emotions. So one of her therapists said to me years ago, don't even bother teaching her self-regulation strategies because she's not even at the point where she can identify. Do you find that as well?
Yeah, it's fascinating because like I said, the two people, like, or did I say that before we were talking? But my oldest and me are really similar, and my youngest and my husband are really similar. And my oldest and me, we know how to label our feelings. We know what we're feeling them. We feel them really strong, like intensely.
Yes.
We're very emotional people. The other two are very calm and steady. And you ask, but if the youngest is feeling any sort of feeling, and you can tell, like she does not know what it is. They both were diagnosed with, when they did their diagnosis, were diagnosed with alexithymia, which is like the inability to put your feelings to words. Like you feel them, but you don't necessarily know how to label them, and you don't know how to talk about them, and you don't exactly know what's happening. And so it's really fascinating to have, like, I see 4 autistic people in one household, and we experience emotions in a completely different way.
Right. And that's such a good point, Cindy, too, that there is such a huge spectrum, right? And so I know in the yoga world, we often see, poses for, or classes for children with autism, but we have to remember that not just, those are probably folks who are highly autistic, right? But there's a whole group of people who are sort of what it used to be called Asperger's on the other end of the spectrum, where they're in classes, and they're not always known. They don't have a label on their head. But as you say, it's about understanding them as learners, as yogis in your class, right?
Yeah, especially too, like in a yoga class, because with the sensory thing, there are
Yeah,
some autistic people who are sensory seeking, and there are some autistic people who are sensory avoiding.
right.
And so like the activities where you're running around and getting all that energy out would be great for these sensory seekers, but like the sensory avoiders, like my kids, like they would be completely overwhelmed by that. So like
Right.
a yoga class for autistic people, I'm like, whoa, what does that even look like? Because
Yes.
those needs are so different.
Yes, exactly
Um,
right. Yes. So
yeah.
tell us a story. Tell us a story about how art has sort of made a difference either in your life in particular, working with your kids, or with maybe one of the teachers in your program. Give you,
Yeah. Okay. Oh, I have so many stories. What story? Um, I think I'm going to tell you a personal story, just about me, if that's okay.
yes.
Um, because there was a painting that I saw in 2004. So this was exactly 20 years ago now. And I was 23 years old, and I was in the midst of like really, really deep social anxiety, but also really passionate about the work I was doing. And so there was an art exhibit that came to Houston. I live in Dallas, so Houston's about 4 hours away. And the Museum of Fine Arts Houston was showing all of like the famous art from the MoMA in New York City, because they were renovating that museum. And so they sent the art to Houston. And so I was thrilled, because I was like poor and 23, and I was never been to New York City. So I was going to see all these famous paintings. And so we drive down there, and I go in, I got to see Starry Night, was underwhelming. And then I walked around the corner though, and I saw Picasso's Girl Before a Mirror. And it was big, and it was like, I felt like my whole body reacted to it. Like I felt
Mm,
like it knocked the wind out of me. I felt um just completely overwhelmed by it, but completely drawn in. And I stood there at that painting for probably 2 hours. I
mm,
at least, because my husband did the
wow.
entire rest of the exhibit, came back through, and I'm still standing in front of this painting. But what was so amazing to me at the time is because I did always feel so different. And I did
Mm,
always feel like there was this outside person that everyone saw, that was the person who like got the degree and got the job and I was in grad school, I was applying to get my PhD at the time. And I was like this just regular person, and that everybody saw. But then the inside was so drastically different. The inside was so shameful and painful. And then in this painting, it's the side by side of, well, it's a girl in a mirror. And so the girl on the outside, she kind of has like makeup on, she's blushed, it's in the Picasso style, like everything's kind of disjointed and stuff. But the mirror, she was purple and blue, and there was this like she had a tear, like this big orange tear coming out down her
mm,
eye. And I, at the same time, I'm like, I'm like meta analysis and now analyzing like
yeah.
what in this painting is creating a strong reaction in me. That's exciting. Art is really exciting that art can do this. And how do I get other people to feel this? So I'm like going on this whole track of like, this is really cool that this is happening to me, while at the same time, like seeing myself mirrored back, like seeing like my pain mirrored back to me. And like, and I could see that was me, and that there were two of me, and like,
Mm,
how do I figure out how to integrate the two of me? And just such a really powerful um experience for me to like be seen
mm,
by an artist that painted it in 1939 or 37 or whatever it was. And
mm,
like, and at that left that, I wrote a 4-page essay. So I've always been a writer apparently, but I wrote this essay. I like changed my degree. I decided I didn't want to get my PhD in art history. I wanted to like figure out this thing. I didn't want to learn more, because I thought if I learned more, then would it ruin the feelings part of it.
yeah.
um and so like it really was this like turning point in my career.
Mm,
um and this sort of turning point in my healing, you know, like this shows the power of like what the right work of art with the right person at the right time, like it's really magical. So that's why it's like show your kids a variety of types of art and a variety of types of media, because you don't know what's going to hit them.
You are
So
such an inspiration. So it's so inspiring. I want to go out now and go look at art differently, because I have to say
yeah,
I haven't really come from that point of view before. Like we were just in Paris last summer, went to the Louvre and, did all the
yeah,
museums, but yes, I was more thinking about my family, my kiddo and all that. I wasn't
right.
really present. So I'm really inspired. That's just incredible. And to
Well,
be able
thank
to
you.
bring this into our elementary classrooms and our young kids yoga classes, right? It has a
Mm-hmm.
place, absolutely. So what would you
Yeah.
say advice to teachers, to elementary school teachers or to kids yoga teachers who are looking to sort of integrate art into a yoga experience, or specifically for children with autism, for
Yeah.
example?
One of my favorite things to do with one, show any work of art to an elementary kid. Like they love it. They love to talk about it. They think it's so fun in class. One of my favorite activities to do is to have them put their body into the positions of the characters in the artwork. And
Oh, wow.
because as we're talking about the meaning, sometimes it gives you like some really key um, language about how it feels. Like there's one example that we have on the website. There's a sculpture called an Nkisi Nkondi power figure from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And no, it's the Congo People's. Sorry, it might not be Democrat, it might be somewhere. Anyway, I just suddenly said that and I don't think it's right, but it is the Congo Peoples with a K. And they're these wooden sculptures, and they would use them. They would hammer a nail in to the figure when like a vow or a treaty or a promise was being made. And so there's these wooden sculptures. They have all these nails in them, but the posture of the figure is kind of like this leaning forward kind of posture, and the kind of the butt sticking out a little bit, their shoulders are forward, their chin is up. And so I have students get up and like put themselves into that position, and they're like, and I'm like, what does it feel like? Have you ever seen that or seen anybody in this position, or ever been in this position yourself? And inevitably someone always says, I feel like I'm my grandmother scolding me about something, because like the kid just stuck his hand out and like started shaking his finger. And I was
Right.
like, yes, that's kind of what's happened. Is if you break this promise, if you break this vow, that this spirit will come out of the sculpture and go punish the person who broke the tree. So it is the
Right.
sort of punishing type of like law,
Right.
what is the word? Someone who is protecting the law or the
Yes.
treaty. So
Yes.
like they got the like core meaning of that sculpture by putting their body into that position, which I
I
don't know that
love
they would
it.
have figured out had they not done that.
Yes.
So that's one of my favorite activities.
Yes. I was just thinking about Monet, because I mean, obviously it's a very popular piece in the Louvre, and to have children sit like the woman and
Mm-hmm.
imagine sitting, because they had to sit for hours while the painter was painting. So imagine
Oh
what that
yeah.
would take, right, to be able to sit still, something that
Yeah.
we definitely have a harder time now than ever, right? Is sitting still.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Monet too, like you looking at it from far away and up close and comparing, and so like moving around the gallery and like seeing how it's different depending on where you're at. That's another good one, especially for Monet, because it looks different up close than it does far away.
Oh, I love it. Awesome.
Yeah.
So how do we connect with you online? Where do we get your book? And how do we join your class, art
Awesome.
class
Okay.
curator?
So the book is Art is About Being Whole. It is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. You can also get a signed copy if you go to cindyingram.com or artisaboutbeingwhole.com. They both go to the same place. Um, it is amazing. And one thing I forgot to say is that each chapter is a work of art that I interpret while I tell my story. So I tell the story of Girl Before a Mirror, and that's the featured artwork. There's a Monet in here. The one about my burnout, there's the painting from Jaws
Right.
movie poster. So you get to kind of learn about art as I go. And then for teachers, I have artclasscurator.com. And then if you click join at the top, I have a membership site with lessons for individual works of art. And we have about 200 different works of art in there, cross time and cultures with they have elementary specific lesson plans and secondary specific lesson plans in there with worksheets, PowerPoints, everything you need. And those movement activities, those worksheets that you need, they're all in there. And they're artworks that are interesting that your kids will enjoy as well. So check that out too.
Beautiful. And you're on social media, obviously.
Yeah, and I'm just a Cindy Ingram on I have a Facebook page, Cindy Ingram, and then my Instagram is Art and Self.
Art and Self. Beautiful. Oh, thank you so much for taking the time. This has been just a joy to spend this time with you, and I can't wait to share this with our community. Thank you so much, Cindy.
Thank you.